Good day, everyone. Thank you for joining me for the inaugural Consult Hyperion podcast on all things payment and all things identity and kind of everything that lives in between. I am honored to have here with us today, Sruti Jain. I won't steal the thunder, but Shruti, maybe take a moment, introduce yourself, and share a little bit about what we're going to be talking about today, and then we can drive into what I think is going to be a really exciting conversation.
Thanks, Howard. Hi, everyone. I am Shruti Jain. I'm a senior consultant at Consult Hyperion. My work here at CHIP is focused on payments and identity, where my team and I apply data science techniques and AI models to ensure secure digital transactions. So my experience, spans really on both sides of AI. So innovating with it. Also utilizing it as a tool for fraud prevention. I am also part of various industry forums and groups that are focused on ensuring digital trust. So that is really to ensure, that individuals are who they claim to be in a digital transaction, which is going to be really, really important for a topic. So I serve as a board member at the Identity and Access Council at the Secure Tech Alliance, where we're trying to advance mobile driver's licenses and other identity initiatives, as well as we're trying to work on building a relying party network for broader MDL adoption. So yeah, I'm also part of the DIAC group in Canada, which has similar objectives. So yeah, that's really much about me. And thanks for having me, Howard. Yeah.
Amazing. Well, I'm convinced it certainly sounds like we're talking to the right person about this very important subject at a very important time. So I'm going to start sort of pretty high level. I'd love to get some of your observations about how you witnessed the advent of sort of AI and machine learning, how they've both expanded the attack surface with a particular focus on fraud, and what's been the sort of enabler of that are things like deep fakes. And thinking about, again, coming back to where you just left off, the implications on both payments and identity. So threw a lot at you, but would love to hear some of your thoughts on that.
That's a great question, and it's a great start to this podcast. So I'd say like the tactics for conducting fraud have become more sophisticated, right, with the use of AI and machine learning. So I remember just going back in time, I remember like my grandma showing me an email, that she'd received, claiming that she'd won a prize, of X amount, and that needed to provide her bank details, to in order to claim it. Even though she was thrilled about the prospect of winning the prize at that time, she quickly realized herself that was a scam. So this takes us back to the time when scams were really simple. The messages were, really easy to spot as fraudulent. Now, what has changed today is like the use of these sophisticated deepfakes and AI generated contents to create these very hyper realistic images, videos, and audios that can convincingly mimic trusted individuals. So here's the thing, like the core idea really remains the same between the past and the present, that is to exploit human goodwill and human trust. So like an example of this, how it, and a fraud of similar fashion have actually it was conducted at the start of this year. It was in news. Is, for instance, imagine like receiving an email from, a video message, let's say, that looks and sounds just like your CEO, asking you some sensitive information about a client project, a confidential client project, I must say, that you've been working on, or, asking me to relay a message to a CFO, to execute a transaction for some partnerships deal. And since it feels so real, you're kind of convinced to just literally go and follow the orders. Now,
Yeah.
this is the form of phishing that we're seeing today. It's really the same old tactics, but it's just amplified by technology, where it has become very difficult it's to draw the difference between what is really genuine and what is fake, making it really, really hard for not only individuals, but also systems and individuals and systems working together to kind of distinguish between the two. And, because of this, it's going to have profound impacts, I think, on both identity and, payment systems
Yeah,
that
no, that
essentially works on the, on trust.
well, that's out. So at an even foundational level, and it's just as much for my own edification as anyone, I'd love to sort of go back to what are the origin of deepfakes? How do they really leverage some of the technology we're seeing today, particularly with a focus around AI, to create these realistic interactions that often lead to, fraud or forgeries or some malicious behavior?
Mhm. So absolutely. So deepfakes are really, as I said, these are, these synthetic medias that have been generated. And specifically today, they're being generated using generative AI models and techniques. And these can take any form. So like it can be in the form of videos, images, text, audio recordings, where the likeness of a person is either manipulated, so like you're manipulating an existing video to replace the face of a person, for example, or it is
Mhm.
completely fabricated, like it's an entirely new media. And there have been numerous generative AI models that are available, and that have been existing for many years now. So one of the early ones was the generative adversarial networks, the GANs. Then, there were variational autoencoders, there were autoregressive models. More recently, I think everybody would have actually read, in articles at some point now about the GPT-4, which is the generative pre-trained transformer 4 model, just because it's been used in the OpenAI ChatGPT and the other, models that are more widely available to the end users to use. So the idea about, how, you asked, like, how do you generate a deepfake, right? So the process really starts with data collection and training, where the bad actor is trying to collect a sample of, let's say, your original video, voice, image that they're just trying to impersonate. And to give you just an example of how widespread this has actually become, earlier this year, I received a call, from someone claiming to be like a bank representative. And they called me to confirm a transaction that I was supposedly making with my card, while I was watching Netflix at home. So sensing something was off, I was like, no, I'm not making any purchases. I asked them to like immediately block my transaction. Now, a typical, bank representative would wrap up the call, but instead the caller began probing for more details, I think. And reflecting back now, I thought that was far more details than what a general bank representative would really need if they were truly looking to secure my account. So as the conversation dragged, it dawned on me that, this isn't really about confirming the transaction. So I hung up. And the whole thing really, like, left me unsettled. It wasn't just a suspicious call. The caller was aiming to do something there. And it just crossed my mind that maybe it would have been an attempt to like harness my voice. Now, let's say if that were the case, what the fraudster could now do is use this fraud sample in order to train any of those, generative AI models, and fine tune it to my voice. So just taking a very simple example of, these of a simple model, the GANs, which is the generative adversarial network. So GANs usually consist of like two neural networks. You can just consider it like two separate, blocks or like networks. One is really like the generator, and the other is the discriminator. Now, the training data is fed to the generator, and the generator is the one generating the fake content. The output of the generator is then fed to the discriminator that evaluates it for authenticity. So like, how well have you done in generating the voice sample, and is it very similar to the actual voice? Then there's a feedback loop that feeds back from the discriminator to the generator until the generator improves over time, producing a increasingly realistic content. So this is really the craft behind deepfake. They go on and on until they find a content which is similar to the actual one. And once they're created, they can be used to do numerous fraudulent schemes, right? So they can be used for swindling money. They can be used to impersonate, influential figures. We've already seen examples of this. They can be used to manipulate public opinion in case of, elections, and which has already been potentially misused in that aspect. So like the potential is really, for misuse
It's almost
once it's,
unlimited.
yes.
Yeah, I mean, you really understand the subject matter. I was going to ask the next question. I think you've done such a extraordinary job of answering. Is thinking about what some of the characteristics are that make deepfake so convincing. But I think you've really given us shed a light on how problematic this is and some of those characteristics. So taking that conversation in a slightly different direction, from a defensibility standpoint, how are deepfakes posing risks to the payment systems, right? And identity authentication in particular. I'd love to get a minute or two of your thoughts about that, and then expand that, outside of payment systems, how it's impacting our socio-political world, our financial institutions, just our environment in general.
Yeah. So deepfakes are really becoming a huge concern in financial services and for our clients. One of the examples I think was, where the bank is, let's say, using voice authentication, right, for logging into, and bank supported can support it for a number of use cases. It could be for logging into the mobile banking app. It could be verifying identities when you're calling a customer service representative, right? So we are seeing now instances where fraudsters have used deepfake tech to mimic, users' voices to gain unauthorized access, and this is pretty alarming. Banks are already concerned, and they're trying to find other ways to secure these services. I think one of the other issues that's often spoken about in the context of deepfake is the new account fraud. So these fraudsters, they have a ton of information from dark web, from social media, from stolen personal data from data breaches. And what they do with all this data is that they try and craft an entirely new and fake synthetic identity profile to open a bank account at a financial institution. And if they're able to bypass, the system, in that case, they open the bank account, they secure loans, and they disappear, leaving, just a trail of financial mess behind. So these are the kind of scenarios that we're already seeing. As you mentioned, there's also a significant risk to the identity verification process, which typically includes a document verification, like a document scanning with like a liveness check. We've all kind of done that for Clear IT. We've used that for TSA pre-check. So let's assume like the fraudster holds my driver's license from one of the data breaches. All that they really need to do now is generate a deepfake video of mine to bypass the liveness check, to trick the system. And once if they're able to do that, this could be used now to open illegal accounts. They could secure loans, and even they could use it for money mule attacks. They could use it for money laundering, and they could use it for like endless purposes. And just to put things into perspective, these are just a few scenarios that I'm talking about, but this is all real. Like a recent report on Fido, which was released, I think, sometime this year, highlighted a shocking 3,000% increase in deepfake attacks on their IT verification system, in just 1 year.
Yeah,
Um,
that's pretty staggering when you think about it. When you think about it, just the growth of this attack surface vis-a-vis these deep fakes. I mean, if I'm being really honest with you, I don't even know if I heard the term deep fake, as recently as 4 or 5 years ago. So this is really, I think, becoming a mainstream. Well, it is a mainstream problem. And so I'm going to flip the conversation a little bit, Shruti. And so you've done such an extraordinary job sort of shining a spotlight on the problem, which I think could probably make us all a little bit nervous if there were people like you out there thinking about how to fix those problems. What are you seeing as some of the emerging technologies that can become detection tools that can help identify and really counteract, this widespread problem, what we're calling deep fakes, and how can these be applied to enhance security, particularly of payment systems and people's personal identity? So think about those detection tools and how we combat this emerging, well, it's already emerged, this sort of growing problem.
So the good news is that, even though there's a rising number that we're seeing in deepfakes, there's an even increasing, counter deepfake attempts that are going on. We're seeing a wave of really smart detection tools that, again, uses AI. So it's like, setting a thief to catch a thief, right? So using, again, generative AI to or other AI models to really detect the odd patterns in these fabricated audios and videos, that human might miss. Um, Most of these tools, are mostly like are not deterministic, but they are probabilistic in nature. So they won't give you a simple output like yes or no, like, is it a deepfake or is it fake or real? But it gives kind of a probabilistic score with a confidence level. And what it really does is that, it allows the user then to make inference, that can be interpreted with like context and sophistication in the end. So these tools, I think, have been of big help for banks and other financial institutions to really counter deepfake.
Tell me more, please. I'm getting a little bit more relieved. It sounds like the good guys are on their way.
Yes, and most of the most of the time, like as with new tech, we need to also push more education, right, with tech. So that was one of the other aspects that I was going to talk about. So people need to know what deepfakes look like, what they are, about their existence. So this knowledge can make anyone, like you and me, better at spotting fakes. And then there's also this new principle, when in cybersecurity, which is just around zero trust. So it's like keeping your guard, always up. So it's like always saying, no way, not so fast. You just can't come in yet because you need to prove every single time who you are. So I think, just the way the systems have been designed are currently being transitioned into the zero trust architecture. Apart from that, along with using these sophisticated detection tools, banks are also, stepping up their authentication processes. So previously we used to have two-factor auth. They're layering this with more, with multiple security measures. So they're including device fingerprinting, they're using behavioral biometrics. So, analyzing my typing pattern would definitely be difficult for an AI to do, and replicate. So I think each of these added layers is going to create that extra hurdle that is going to be needed, to keep the fraudsters away from the malicious intent and to get through our systems.
Well, I was having breakfast with a couple of good friends the other day, and we were talking about this conversation. And one of my colleagues at breakfast, extraordinary security thinker, has led, CISO-like roles at large public companies, including RSA. And we were talking about multi-factor authentication. He sort of really, you're building on sort of what he's calling polyfactor authentication. So having that truly layered approach, which we've always thought about as a network architecture or an endpoint architecture event system, but now it's really extrapolating to, I think, these things that you're suggesting around identity and how we're going to prevent through this layered approach, this, or what he called this polyfactor approach, to really create a very robust layered security approach to protect our identities and protect our capital and our financial assets, because these deepfakes are so convincing and so prominent. And so that kind of leads me to another question here, Shruti. who does this, right? I call the holy trinity, the combination of government and big tech, and I guess even our academic institutions and the academic world. How do they work in collaboration, or do they work in collaboration to create or to prevent the malicious use of deepfake technology? What roles do you see these entities playing in exactly that, safeguarding our payment systems, our identity verification processes, and the like?
Uh, so I believe, the collaboration is the key here, and big techs, governments, financial institutions, academic institutions are kind of all well positioned to work in collaboration in order to overcome this threat. Um, so these collaboration, I think, will be very, very essential in developing these sophisticated anti-fraud tools. But it is also going to be very, the collaboration is also going to be very important when you're talking about joint educational programs, right? Where customers can then become proactive participants in fraud detection along with the anti-fraud tools and with anti-fraud tools. So just considering individual roles here, so like for big tech, I think for these companies, it's not only crucial for them to like look at advancement and innovation, but they are, and I think they're also considering the ethical implications of these technologies, right? So just recently, I think it was last month, when OpenAI, they kind of demonstrated that they can recreate a human voice with just a 15-second clip. They made a very responsible decision to hold that back from releasing this technology to the public until they fully understand the potential risk which is involved. So this really underscores like the responsibility that big tech can assume to ensure that their innovations are kind of used appropriately and positively to society.
Yeah, no, no, please carry on. I was going to build on that, but I think you were going exactly where I was going to ask.
Yeah, and then just coming to the banks, the polyfactor authentication, as you mentioned, so they are already adopting like a layered defensive strategy. So it's, as I said, it's about blending advanced tech, you know, um, with the sharp instinct of their experienced fraud analysts to like spot anomalies. So I think investing in the ongoing training of the staff is another crucial element, just ensuring that their own team stays ahead of the fraudsters as the technology evolves. Banks, I believe, must also, should also be working closely with the regulators to help develop some of these new standards and requirements tailored specifically to the unique challenges of generative AI. From the regulatory perspective, I particularly think it is really crucial to encourage like innovation. Generative AI, much like has also been immensely beneficial, and so we should not be forgetting that it can be used for a range of positive applications. And so it's really finding the right balance, especially since some of these, on the other side, some of these transformational risk may not just be linear, but in this case, especially deepfake, where generative AI can make fraud particularly easier and cheaper, to grow on an exponential scale.
Yeah.
And again, can serve a very dual role, right? First, educating, um, you know, and then secondly, universities are really the hub of cutting edge research, so they can partner with some of these financial institutions to develop these anti-fraud solutions to mitigate this threat as well.
You touched on something a moment ago that I'd love for you to sort of think about, and maybe sort of, as we come to the end of our podcast, we've talked about all the threats and all the malicious behavior and all the bad actors that could take advantage of the AI and machine learning technologies that, sort of metamorphosizes into these deep fake attacks. But you just touched on this. there's a real promise here as well in the application of this technology to create, better opportunities, better experiences for people. Have you given any thought to that? And can you share a little bit about what some of your observations have been in taking this technology and applying it in a more altruistic or a more holistic way to engage people and interact with people both at a corporate level and an individual level?
I think it has great potential, like, if it is used ethically. So let's take the example of education. Deepfake can really make some of these learning experience engaging. So imagine like your history class, brings the historical figures of, to life, allowing students to actually interact with them rather than reading about it in the books. So it's like, it can really transform the traditional learning methods in a way, and help students understand and, have a deeper understanding of the subject. Um, One of the other things where, I think deepfakes is particularly proving very helpful is language translation, and making communication more accessible, right? So just with movies, like if I don't understand Japanese, just having deepfake to, just have the entire movie, been replaced by deepfake media in English with proper lip syncing and proper translation would be amazing. And this could all just be automated. So like, there need not be a human intervention in order to do all these things. Again, in entertainment industry, I think it is, and we've already seen the application of deepfakes over there. Filmmakers can really create these new visual effects, and it was previously possible. I think with generative AI, it will be something that is going to be less costly, and is going to be more sophisticated. It can bring, as I said, like, historical figures, especially like in documentaries, would be so good to actually have them come in life. So like, I believe ethically approved deepfake will have a lot of positive implications in the way we're going to interact as well, Howard.
Yeah, no, I mean that's a really inspiring and healthy and happy note to end on. So with that, I will say that it's really scary, but it's nice to know that there's super smart people like you out there thinking about this and keeping us safe at night. So thank you for that. I'll thank you for joining me today, Shruti. This has been a conversation that I think could go on for a lot longer because it's a big subject and something that you're clearly passionate about. So thank you for joining us on our
Thank you
inaugural
for having
podcast.
me.
It was our pleasure. I'll conclude by just saying that I've had a sneak peek and it's extraordinary. Shruti is publishing a white paper that'll be available in early September. So if you've tuned in and want to learn more, then I'd encourage you to read the white paper. And if you really want to learn more, please contact us at consulthyperion.chip.com and we'd be happy to share anything we think about because we do a lot of it in our own little world, particularly around this subject. So thank you for joining me today, Shruti, and look forward to having lots more conversations like this.
Thanks, Howard.